Hi, everyone. It's nice to be here. We are Melonport. So Melonport is based out of Zurich. We're together with Reto Trinkler, my co-founder, and George Hallam. We're building blockchain software for asset management. So hopefully I'm going to go through a little bit around our vision and then more about the protocol that we're building, and then show you a quick demo and make a small announcement. So, I mean, one of our fundamental views in building a blockchain software for asset management is clearly we see crypto as an asset class which is in the rising. A lot of people in the financial space especially dismiss this. We've seen it before with junk bonds, we've seen it with ETFs, we've seen it with commodities, EM. All of these asset classes, when they first came out, they were seen as uninvestable. We see the same reaction today from most financial institutions. We don't believe it. We think it is the next asset class, and that's why we're building the infrastructure and the protocol to support the next Mike Milken or the next John Bogle or whoever it is that's going to pioneer this asset, make this to be seen as an investable asset class. Just quickly to highlight 2 or 3 of the reasons why we're so convinced it's an asset class. I don't think it's a surprise to anyone here. But one of the reasons is the huge growth in the space. So, you know, Ethereum alone has already, I think it is 1,800 ERC20 tokens, completely uncorrelated returns to every other investment class, and probably also has outperformed every other asset class out there. The question remaining is, who is it that's going to pioneer this asset class and make it investable? Or make it sort of part of every portfolio allocation? We don't know, but we hope that they'll be using Mellon when they do it. We're already seeing large signs of this. I'm sure a lot of these names are very recognizable out there, and some of these people are already alpha testing or beta testing our protocol right now. So we're seeing new names come up every day to support our thesis. And maybe just a couple of words. So I just mentioned our first fundamental belief, which is that we believe crypto is an asset class in the rising. The second thing I want to talk about briefly is how inefficient the traditional asset management world is. If we make a very brief comparison, most of the requirements for fund managers or hedge funds today require archaic or are built on archaic technology and archaic systems. Most of them stem from the regulator requiring reporting and requiring proofs that fund managers are acting in certain ways and providing certain or behaving within certain risk parameters. Unfortunately, though, the way that this is done is so inefficient and so expensive, making the barriers to entry for fund management extremely high. So in order to set up and manage a fund today, you need about $150 million in order just to break even within year 1. And so I think this is kind of ridiculous in today's age of technology, and I think I'm going to hopefully try and explain how smart contracts can automate a lot of these processes. And you know, as more and more assets become blockchainized or collateralized on the blockchain, you can see this also transpiring, not just in the crypto space, but also to the traditional world of asset management. So what is the Mellon Protocol that I think I've just kind of touched on the why we're doing it. Now I'm going to kind of touch on the how we're doing it. So what is the Mellon Protocol? So the Mellon Protocol is a protocol that allows you to do 4 things. The first thing is it allows you to set up a fund structure. So by that I mean predetermining the parameters by which your fund can be run by. So if you want to set up a fund that's compliant within a sort of regulatory structure of your jurisdiction, and you want to say like, okay, or even if you just want to reassure your investors that you're not going to gamble everything, that they invest in one particular asset that might or might not go bust, you can create certain parameters around your fund that say, for example, this fund is never going to put more than 5% of the assets under management in more than one asset. Or, if we see a drawdown of 20%, if the fund loses 20%, we're going to reduce risk across the board. Just a few examples, but you can sort of parameterize how you want your fund to be run and what the risk management processes is around that through smart contracts. The second thing that the protocol allows you to do is manage your fund within those parameters. The third thing that it allows you to do is build an auditable track record. I think this might be very underestimated as a value add, perhaps in this room. But for fund managers in the traditional world, or even in the crypto world, most investors require audited track records. In the traditional world, you have to get, pay $50,000, $100,000 a year just to get your performance audited. In the blockchain world, this is all transparent and easily comparable across the board. The idea behind the Mellon Protocol is that we can find a way to standardize performances as well, so that you can easily see, who's performing better on whatever metrics you decide to judge them by. The fourth thing that the protocol allows you to do is invest in other funds or allow others to invest in yours. I'll touch a bit more on that shortly. So just a few things about the protocol. So we have built the protocol, and we've sort of built the initial protocol and initial modules around the protocol. We open sourced them last week, and we've started linking some of the code to the user interface, which brings me to my first point, which it should be very easy to use. Anyone's free to use the protocol under their own interface. But Melonport is building the first interface. It will look soon something like this. I'll show you a demo at the end of this, a very quick demo. But it should be pretty easy to use. Other benefits, I hope we've quickly touched on them, but obviously open and transparent. Lowers cost and times. That's particularly important in the traditional world where it's so inefficient. Modular and inclusive, I didn't really touch on this. We basically recognize there is the need for opinion when you're setting up a fund. Everybody has their own requirements, their own needs. And we recognize also that we can't build it all. So while we're building the initial suite of modules, we choose for it to be open source so that anyone can add modules into the protocol to suit their own needs, and also can improve things continuously over time. So there is a non-negotiable part called the core, which every fund has to have, and then there's this modular element, which includes the room for opinion. And finally, decentralized and reliable. So if successful, the first phase is to make this possible on Ethereum. If successful, this infrastructure can be applied to traditional fund management and possibly VC structures as well. Could dramatically revolutionize and disrupt traditional fund administration. These are the inefficient people that charge a lot of money and throw a lot of human power to do things which are reasonably easy and honestly don't always do it accurately. As we see more real-world assets being created or put on the blockchain, either collateralized or in other ways, it really increases the pool of assets that become tradable within this protocol. So just a few examples of some real-world assets, gold and fiat currencies that are already being collateralized. And maybe now a few words on the idea behind how this all works. So the idea would be that once the protocol is deployed, users have to pay a licensing fee in Mellon token in order to access the software. This is probably going to be imposed on trading. On the other side of it, once the protocol is deployed in its entirety, Mellon tokens will be created by inflation and will be paid to developers who add the most useful modules onto the network. So the idea is to very highly incentivize development, realizing that we can't build everything, and understanding how big this space is and how widely the needs vary. This diagram kind of explains, hopefully, or gives an idea of how it all works. I mentioned the core, so every single portfolio has to have this core element. It's non-negotiable, it glues everything else together, and it also it standardizes how the performance calculations are done, so no one can choose how they report their performance. The part that everyone can choose or have input in is on all of these modular classes. So each of these are module classes that we've identified. Anyone is free to add modules into the class they may want to add into. So for example, exchange, Ether Delta is absolutely free to integrate their exchange as, like, for example, E1, IDEX the same, or any other exchanges out there can just integrate as long as they follow the template provided. Same with the asset universe. So this is the idea behind this is that you predefine the assets that your fund is allowed to invest in, so that your investor has the comfort knowing you can't run off with the funds or do anything silly. and also that you approve the funds or the universe of assets that the person you're trusting your money with is going to invest in. Price feeds, you know, you could choose to get your price feeds from Oracleize or Reuters or anywhere else. Doesn't really matter, the user decides, but we give everyone the option to choose. Same with fees, that's management and performance fees if you want to charge any. And risk management, that's probably one of the most complicated ones. That's, you know, how do you want to run your, which risk management ideas do you want to implement on your fund before deploying it? Once these are deployed, obviously they can never be changed. But that should give investors some level of comfort as well. So putting the whole ecosystem together, you can see that many different portfolios or funds can be created with a different mix of modules, depending on their choice. They all connect to the core. All of these portfolios or portfolio managers, they pay licensing fees in Mellon token anytime they trade. These licensing fees are then collected into the governance and multi-chain fund. So we'll release more information on the functionality of that later in the next few months. At the same time, there's this Mellon inflation, which I mentioned. And this inflation is basically there to incentivize developers who are adding modules. And the reward mechanism will work something like the following. It's going to be a function of the difficulty factor in the module classes. So you can recognize already that some of those module classes will require a lot more work than others, and the usage of the module. So how many times is that module selected in someone's portfolio? So I think that's basically the end of my presentation, but I did promise to show a short demo of how this all comes together. Okay, so this is basically what the interface looks like right now. This is just a screen recording we did earlier. Basically, you just give your name, your fund a name, or your portfolio. And the idea is that on all of these drop-down lists, at the moment, it's just the Mellon version that exists. But pretty soon we expect, so here we're pre-selecting the assets that the fund can trade with. But the idea is that soon when we open up the templates and people start adding their own modules, these drop-down lists will contain many other options. And you're basically just selecting what exchange modules you want your fund to be able to trade with, where you want your price feed to come from, what your asset registrar is, so you know which universe of assets do you want to be allowed to invest in. And then the fund, this is obviously on the testnet, gets deployed. And once it's deployed, the fund can only ever act within the parameters you pre-selected. So there we are, I think. Yeah, there's test capital that we just created. And now you can see part of the core is actually, so you can see that these are the 4 assets the fund can invest in. And now the idea is you can invest, or outsiders can invest Ether into your portfolio. And every time a new Ether is created, a new share in the fund gets created as well. So it's kind of like an open-ended fund structure. So basically, in conclusion, this is still very new. We released the portal a few days ago. It's still a little bit buggy, but it's free for anyone to access right now. It's portal.melonport.com if you want to play around with it. We also have a small announcement to make, which is that as of, I think, a few minutes ago, we just open sourced also all the front end work here, and so everything's on GitHub, back end and front end. We just completed our token issuance this week, so we'll start on the auditing of all the smart contracts within the next couple of weeks. We're definitely looking for people to contribute there, and we'd love to hear your feedback. And if you need to contact us, like I said, myself, George, Reto, my co-founder, are very easily accessible, and we'd love to hear from you. So thank you very much.